Hi there, and welcome back to another video. So in this video, I'm going to show you how to install Chia on a Raspberry Pi, and it's going to be a headless Raspberry Pi, meaning that there's no desktop interface. And then later on, we're going to connect a UI from a remote host to this remote damien, this remote node, in order that we can have a user interface, but not on the Raspberry Pi itself. So the first thing that you want to do is, of course, get a Raspberry Pi. Now, it does require a Raspberry Pi 4, as the Pi 3 is not supported. Additionally, you need a 64-bit OS and not just a 64-bit Pi. So we're going to be using the Raspberry Pi imager as they suggested right here. So you're going to want to click on this link first and install download for Windows or whatever you have running. So once we have that installed, you're going to want to insert the Raspberry Pi SSD or the micro SD card. Now you should just follow the instructions on how to set up the Raspberry Pi with the book that comes with it. However, I did want to show you where to plug in the fan and then also how to insert the SD card into the USB adapter they provided. So you want to have the pins facing away from those little grooves inside that USB adapter. And then also, whenever you're inserting the SD card into the Raspberry Pi, you want the pins to be facing up towards the Raspberry Pi and then insert it so the label of the SD card should be facing down along with the little groove to get it out. And again, I recommend checking out the booklet. And then from there, we're going to flash the SD card with the 60-bit OS. So you're going to want to go to this website right here, which is their official download website, and you're going to want to install the zip file right here. Now I've already downloaded it, so if I go to my downloads folder, and then I already unzipped it, so I right clicked and then did extract to this folder, and here you can see that there's an image file. So this is the 64-bit light image for the Raspberry OS. So once you have the SD card connected to your computer, you're going to do the Raspberry Pi imager. And then here, if you choose the OS, you can see that the built-in ones are just the 32-bit OS. So you're going to want to scroll down and use custom. And then here you're going to navigate to the image file and click open. And then now you're going to choose the SD card. Now be careful not to choose any of your other mounted drives. So this is my plotter actually, so because it will erase everything on that. So make sure that you choose the right one. Here's my 32-bit or gigabyte SD card, and then you're going to click right and click yes to confirm that you're okay with it erasing all the data. And now let this finish flashing the SD card. And real quick, while that is flashing, so I went one directory below. So this is going to be the URL that I'm going to post in the description, and then you're going to want to choose the latest. So right now the latest version is the 2021-0409, and however, by the time you watch this video, it could be a newer version. So I would always install the latest, and maybe there will be an official version in the future. But currently this is still kind of in testing, so this will not be the most stable, but it is the only way you can run Chia on a Raspberry Pi. Okay, so now that it's done flashing, you might be presented with this little Windows message. I would just click cancel, and you can click OK. You can click cancel again and just click continue. And now we're going to need to make some modifications to the boot files so that we can enable SSH and to add our Wi-Fi if we're going to use Wi-Fi, or if you're going to just plug it directly in with the Ethernet cable, you can kind of skip that step. So we're going to want to go to our file explorer, and for me, every time I flash the SD card, it makes it disappear, so I have to unplug the USB and then plug it back in. And then again, when you plug it back in, you are going to be presented with this, and don't hit format disk. Make sure that you hit cancel and just OK. And so there's going to be two drive letters. So you're going to see probably one that says USB and another one that, so here's the USB and then another one that says boot. You're going to want to click on the one that says boot, and then you should see all these files. Now if you don't see these .dat or these file extensions, you're going to want to click on view and then have this checked right here, file name extensions. So then go back to the boot, and you're going to want to do right click, do new, and then do a new text document, and then we're going to do SSH, and then go to the bottom and delete the txt dot. And what this will do is tell the Raspberry Pi to enable SSH on boot up, and then now we're going to add our our Wi-Fi network. So we're going to do right click, new, and then your text document, and this is going to be called WPA underscore supplicant, and make sure that this is typed correctly. And then .conf for config, click yes, and then open that up. Now I went to this website to just get this information, and I'll post this in the description as well. So you basically want to copy this right here, and I'll have this in the description as well, and then paste it into this file. Now if you're not in the US, make sure to change this to whatever country you are in. And then here for the SSID, this is going to be your network name. So mine is Mr. Pig's Network. And then for the PSK, you're going to enter in the password for the Wi-Fi. And then you're just going to click File, Save. So now we can go ahead and eject this SD card and then plug it into our Raspberry Pi. So I'm going to go ahead and do that. Okay, so now that we've inserted the SD card into the Raspberry Pi and booted it up, now we're going to have to wait for it to boot up and then SSH into it. However, in order to SSH into it, we need the IP address. So in order to get the IP address, you can connect the Raspberry Pi to a monitor, and whenever it loads, it will show you the IP address that it grabs. If it doesn't, then you might have to check your configuration file for the WPA supplicant file and then reboot it. However, you can also use this unmount tool. So I will post this in the description. So if you install this tool, it will also install a ZenMap. And then here you're going to want to type in your network's IP address. So mine's 10.0.0. And then after the last dot, you're going to want to do an asterisk to say that ping all of the addresses available. And in order to get this, you can do ipconfig select string, and if you're on Wi-Fi, I would do Wi-Fi right here, and then do IPv4, and this will show it. Or you can just do ipconfig, and it will show you everything, and you can find it in there. So you're going to want to change this to ping scan, so that we do the lightest type of scan, and then just click scan. Alright, and then we're going to scroll up, and then you're going to look for one that says Raspberry Pi. So right above that one is going to be the IP address. So in this case, the IP address is 10.0.044 for this Raspberry Pi. I have multiple Raspberry Pis on my network, so this is another one that I have. So now that we have the IP address, we can SSH into it. So if you don't already have PuTTY installed, I would go ahead and install that. But you're going to want to open up PuTTY and then copy in the IP address and click open. Now this is going to pop up the first time you SSH into it, and just click yes. And so you're going to log in as Pi, and then the default password is Raspberry. So type in Raspberry. If I spelled it right. Alright, and now that we're remoted in, we can go ahead and follow the rest of the instructions on the Chia wiki. So here it says you'll need to adjust the swap space if you plan on running the GUI on the Raspberry Pi. However, we plan on running the GUI on a remote machine, so we can actually skip this step, and then we can scroll down and proceed like normal, as if we're installing it almost on a Linux machine. So we're going to want to do git clone, so I would just copy this over and then paste it into here. Now, I don't think Git is default installed on the Raspberry image, so what you're going to do is do sudo apt get, do install, and then git, and this will install Git on the machine. Do Y and then hit enter. And now that Git's installed, we can go ahead and copy in the command that we just tried, and now it'll copy down the Chia network folders from their GitHub. Okay, now that those are copied down, we can change our directory into it. So do cd chia and then just click tab, and then now we're just going to do sh install.sh. And now this might take a few minutes, so just give it some time. Okay, so now that Chia has finally finished installing, you're going to want to do / and then do activate. And now we're going to want to do Chia initialize, so init, and this will initialize Chia. Now if you're using the Raspberry Pi as a harvester, I would check out my harvester videos, but if you're running a full node on the harvester, you can just do Chia initialize. And then now, if you already have a Chia and you want to import the private keys into this, you can do Chia keys add. However, in this demonstration, I'm going to just generate a new keys. So generate. Okay, so that now that the new keys have been generated, I would want to copy over the 24 passphrase into a secure location and back it up several times. So now let's go ahead and start Chia. But first, what I want to do is disable UPnP, because this will be the second node on my network. So I would do Chia configure -UPnP and then do false. And so now I don't really have to worry about the nodes conflicting with each other. So now let's go ahead and do Chia start farmer. So this will start the full node, the farmer, the harvester, everything. So it's starting up the Damien, and now it's started up all the services. So now let's just check to see if it is actually working. So we're going to do Chia show, and let's do -h to see the commands or the parameters that we can use. So if we do the -c, we can see the connections. If we do the -s, we can see the current state of the blockchain. So let's do those two. So let's do Chia show -c and -s. All right, and here you can see that it's connected to our farmer, our full node, our wallet. However, it hasn't made any connections, or it has made a connection to another full node. And so now it's actually updating the blockchain, although it is going to take a minute. So, however, we don't really want to run run everything from the command line. We want to run it with the GUI. However, we're going to use the GUI on a remote machine. So let's go ahead and stop everything. So let's do Chia stop all -d, and this will stop all the services. And now you actually might come across these like exceptions, where it kind of messes up. And from my experience, like restarting the Raspberry Pi, it kind of fixes those. So if you do run across these, I would go ahead and restart your Raspberry Pi just to make sure that it is running correctly. But these exceptions aren't to be too worried about as of right now. They could be fixed in the future. So let's go ahead and go to the wiki on connecting a UI to a remote Damien. So the first thing that we're going to want to do is change the config file on the host Damien, which is our Raspberry Pi. And we're going to change the property of self-host name from localhost to the 0.0.0.0. So in order to do this, we're going to do sudo nano, and then do dash with a little tilde, and then /.chia. And then we're going to do mainnet, and then config, and then config again. And then now we're going to want to find the localhost property, or the self-host name, which is going to be all the way down here. So just keep scrolling down until you find it. So if you've hit UI, you went a little bit too far. So you're going to want to go back up a little bit. And here we can see that self-host name is right here. So we're going to want to delete out localhost .0.0.0, and then you're going to do Control X, click Y, and then click Enter, and now the config is updated. So now the next step is we're going to want to enable the firewall from our remote machine to this port. However, in my case, I had to install the UFW. So let's go ahead and do that. So let's do sudo app git install and then UFW. And now that that's installed, we need to enable it. So you're going to do sudo UFW enable. And if that comes up, just do Y and click enter. And now it says the firewall is active and enabled. So now the next step is to copy over the damien cert files from the Raspberry Pi, to the host that's going to be running the UI. So the best way to do this for a headless is just to insert a USB. So let me go ahead and insert the USB. Okay, so this is future me inserting a step. So apparently when you activate the firewall, it will actually block the SSH session eventually. So you're going to want to add that rule before you add the other rule. So let me show you how to do that real fast. So it's very similar to how we added the rule for our remote host. So you're going to do sudo UFW allow from, and then you're going to do the IP address of the host that you're going to be remoting from. So it could be the same as your remote host from before. In my case, it's a different. So 63 to any port, and then do 22 for the SSH port, and then proto, and then TCP, and then just click enter, and it'll add that rule. Now you want to do this before you add the other rule, or else you'll be kicked off the session. Now if you do get kicked off, you can always connect the Raspberry Pi to a screen, connect a keyboard, and log in that way, and then add this rule, and it'll allow you to remote in. So I forgot to do that. Now carrying on, now that we're back. Okay, so now that I have plugged in the USB into the Raspberry Pi, let's go ahead and list out the disk connected to the Raspberry Pi. So do ls-l /dev disk, and then by-uuid. And now the one that we're looking for, if you don't have anything else plugged in, it would be the SDA and -1. And then you're going to want to create a directory in your media folder. So we're going to do sudo mkdir, which will create a directory, do media, and then now we're going to create a directory. You can name this whatever, but I'm going to name it USB. And then the next step is to do sudo chown, and then do dash with a capital R pi : pi, and then go to the media USB folder. Okay, and now we're going to manually mount this USB. So we're going to do sudo mount /dev SDA 1 in our case, and then we're going to tell it where to mount. So we're going to do media, and then we're going to go to the USB folder that we just created, and then we're going to do -o uid equals pi, comma gid equals pi. And now that we've done that, let's go ahead and just make sure that the USB is seen. So let's do ls, and then do media USB, and here we can see the folders that I currently have in this USB. So let's go ahead and make another directory. So let's do sudo mkdir media USB, and let's create one called certs. Alright, and then let's go ahead and move over the files that we need. So we're going to do CP for copying, and then the first is going to be the source. So we're going to do the tilde /.chia, do config, or sorry, mainnet, then config, and then you want to go to the SSL, and then the damien, and then here we're going to copy over the private damien CRT file, and then the next hit space, and then you're going to tell it where to copy to. So in our case, it's going to be media USB and then certs, and then we're going to do the same thing but with the key file. So you can hit the up arrow and then delete the CRT and then type in key, and then let's just make sure that these got copied over. So let's do ls media USB certs, and here we can see that they are copied over. And then let's just go ahead and unmount the USB. So let's do unmount media USB. Oops, I put it in, so it's unmount. And we might need to do sudo. And now the USB is unmounted, so we can go ahead and unplug it. Okay, and so I actually skipped over one step, so we're going to need to allow the remote UI to connect to our port 55400 on the Damien host. So now that we have the UFW installed, we're going to do sudo UFW allow from, and now this is going to be the IP address of your remote host. So in my case, I have a host on the 10.0.0.231. And so this is going to be the host that actually runs the graphical user interface. So I'm going to do that 10.0.0.231. And then we're going to do to any port 55400 proto TCP. And now it should say rule added. Now, if you need help finding your IP address for your remote host, you can do IP config like we did earlier, or IF config for Ubuntu machines. And so now that we have that enabled, let's go ahead and go to our remote host. And then you're going to want to install Chia on this machine. Now, if you already have Chia already installed and you're using it, I would actually uninstall it first. So go to add and remove in my case. Now if you don't have it installed, just install it fresh. Okay, and then when it's uninstalled like that, it actually leaves 2 folders that you're going to want to delete, or possibly even 3 folders. So you're going to go to the C drive, users, go to your user, and then you're going to want to delete this folder right here. Oops. And then you're going to want to do backup, and then click view and make sure that hidden items are checked, and then go back and go to app data, go to local, and delete the Chia blockchain folder from here. Back up and then go to roaming, and then also delete the Chia blockchain folder here, so that any previous configurations will not affect anything. Because I did try this in previously installed Chia, and it just did not seem to work until I reinstalled it and deleted those folders. So I already have the install on here. So I'm going to go ahead and reinstall it. Okay, so now that Chia is installed, since we're not using this as the full node, we're just using this for the graphical user interface. Whenever it's done connecting to Wallet, we can just exit out of it. So on this machine, you don't want to do create or import or anything like that. Just close out of it right now. Click yes. And now we need to make some changes to this host. So let's go back to the wiki. Okay, and then now on the wiki, under the on the UI host, we can see now that we're going to use those cert files that we copied earlier, and then we're going to put them in this location right here. So let's go back to our remote machine, open up Windows or File Explorer, go to your C drive, users, your username, .chia, mainnet, config, SSL, and then you're going to want to create a new folder called UI. Open that up, and then open up another File Explorer, go to the USB that you've plugged in and copy the search from, and then you just want to copy over both of these certs into this folder. Alright, and then now that we've done that, let's go back to the wiki, and here we can see that we also need to change part of the config file for this host as well. So we're going to want to enter in the Damien's host right here, so that's going to, in my case, could be the 10.0.0.44, and then we're going to want to change this right here. So let's go back to this, and then go up 2 files, and then open up the config file, And yours config file might look different. They seem to change the Windows version to look different recently. And then you want to scroll down until you find the UI section. Okay, so right here you can see that we're under the UI section. And then right here, you're going to want to change this asterisk self-host name to be the IP address of the Raspberry Pi, so 10.0.0.44 in my case. And then right here under the Damien SSL, you're going to want to change the Damien part of this to the folder name that you created. And so I would suggest just UI, and then do that, and click Save. Okay, so now, I closed out or stopped the service on my Raspberry Pi. So let's go back to that. Okay, so there's actually one last step that we have to do on our UI host. So we're going to need to add this Chia root environmental variable on that UI host, or else it's going to try to connect to the remote host if we don't. So let's minimize this. And then on your UI host, you're going to want to hit the Windows key, type in Advanced System Settings. And then here you're going to go to Environment Variables, click New under the User Variables, and then do chia.root. And then here you're going to want to do the path to the mainnet folder, so // users, your username, .chia, and then .mainnet. Click OK, click OK again, and click OK again. Okay, so now that I have rebooted the Raspberry Pi, we're going to want to start the Chia node again. So we're going to cd into the Chia blockchain folder, do /activate, and then we're going to do Chia start farmer, which will start everything. Okay, and now that everything has been started, we're going to want to go back to the host that is running the UI. So now that we have everything set up in here, we can actually just launch Chia as we normally would. And so now when Chia launches, from this, you have to see that this is showing up at the top. If you don't see this, that means that it's connecting to locally to the remote or to the local Chia accounts. And so since we already added the keys or generated key, you should see private key with public fingerprint. And so if we click on that, so now this is the Chia, and we can of course skip this step right here. So we're running the graphical user interface on one computer, and we're running the full node, the wallet, the harvester on another computer. Now the upside of this is, let's say that your main computer is a laptop and you want to take it with you. Well, you can just set up a cheap Raspberry Pi to run as your full node, or you can set up a cheap Raspberry Pi to run as harvesters, which is incredibly useful. And here we can see that it is connected to a full node, so it is syncing, probably rather slowly. And it just started, but this will start to sync. Now the downside of this is obviously you can't add plots from the Raspberry Pi. You wouldn't really want to plot on Raspberry Pi anyways. You want to have harvesters that point to the Raspberry Pi, because if we do this and we do browse, obviously it's going to go to the folders on this computer and not the Raspberry Pi. So this is mostly just to allow you to have access to your wallet, your full node, make sure everything's running and everything like that. Now I am creating a PowerShell module that will allow you to remotely access these things, that will make it more usable. However, that's still in the works for remote capabilities. So this will allow you to run a graphical user interface on on Windows. Now if you did want to do it for an Ubuntu machine, it does have, so I had to use this troubleshooting, and the one thing that I needed to change was this right here, the Chia root environment variable. And so you will have to add this variable to the Ubuntu machine and put this as the value for it. And you can look that up online, it's pretty straightforward, but once you added that, that's how I got this. And so if you don't have this right here, the farmer IP address with the 55400, then something is wrong, and I would check this section. So I hope this video was helpful. If you have any other videos you would like me to make, just let me know in the comments. And if you have any questions, also put them in the comments, and I'll try my best to answer them. However, this was a bit of a learning process, and I think it was just a fun exercise to run a remote graphical user interface and a Damien on 2 separate computers. All right, bye for now.